Ethan Ward had lived on the old ranch for almost 8 years, and in all that time, he had learned to enjoy the quiet sounds of the land. He liked the wind moving across the dry grass, the slow creak of the wooden gate, and the steady breath of his horses in the early morning. He was a calm cowboy who preferred silence over noise and steady work over fast excitement. Most people in town knew him as the quiet one, someone who never caused trouble and never stepped into problems that did not belong to him. That morning, the sun was rising through a thin layer of clouds, painting the sky a soft orange. Ethan was repairing a loose hinge on the barn door. The winter storms had been rough, and many things around the ranch needed fixing. Ethan liked repairing things. It made him feel useful and steady. As he tightened the last bolt, he caught the faint sound of something unusual in the distance, a rattling, an uneven sound that did not belong to the wind or to any animal. He stood still and listened carefully. The sound grew louder, and now he could hear a tired horse and wooden wheels shaking on the rough road. Ethan set down his tools and wiped his hands on his denim pants. Visitors were rare on his ranch, and unexpected visitors were even rarer. A minute later, a wagon rolled into view. The horse pulling it looked exhausted, and the wagon leaned to one side, as if something was broken underneath. On the wagon sat 3 women sisters, as he later learned, each holding something different in her hands. The oldest held the reins, the middle one held a small bag, and the youngest seemed to be holding a map that had almost torn in the wind. The wagon rolled to a slow stop near Ethan's barn. The horse let out a deep sigh, almost relieved. The 3 women climbed down one by one. The eldest sister, Mary, looked strong and calm, with steady eyes that showed she had seen many hard days. Ruth, the middle sister, appeared softer in her movements, with gentle hands and a warm smile. The youngest, Sarah, looked tired but curious, her eyes searching the ranch as if she wanted to understand everything at once. Ethan stepped forward with a polite nod. "Morning," he said softly. Mary returned the nod. "Morning. We're sorry for the sudden visit. Our wagon wheel broke a few miles back, and then the horse slowed down too much. We didn't know where else to stop." Ethan looked at the wagon and quickly noticed the cracked wheel. "You're welcome to rest here," he said. "The barn is dry and warm. You can take your horse inside and let it rest." The sisters exchanged relieved smiles. They led the horse into the barn while Ethan helped lift their bags from the wagon. The barn was clean, and a soft light filled the space through the open windows. The sisters looked around in surprise. Most barns they had seen were messy, dusty, or cluttered, but Ethan's barn was neat and carefully arranged. Tools hung in their proper places. The hay was stacked in even rows, and the floor had been swept recently. Sarah laughed softly and said, "You think you can handle guests like us, cowboy?" Ethan blinked, surprised by the playful tone. He was not used to jokes from strangers, especially not from 3 sisters standing in his barn at once. But her smile was bright and friendly, so he simply replied, "I'll manage." The sisters settled down while Ethan checked the wagon wheel outside. It was badly cracked, and repairing it would take time. He returned to the barn to explain the situation. "I can fix it," he said, "but it might take a few hours. And it looks like the sky is getting heavy. A storm might come." Mary looked toward the sky. Dark clouds were gathering quickly. "We don't want to be a burden," she said. "You're not," Ethan replied. "You can stay until the storm passes." Before long, the rain began. It started with a soft patter, then quickly turned into a heavy downpour. The barn became a safe shelter from the loud rain and sharp wind outside. Ethan lit a lantern and brought extra blankets from his storage chest. The sisters thanked him again and again, with the storm keeping them inside. All 4 of them found themselves sitting together near a bale of hay. The lantern gave a warm glow, making the barn feel calm and homely. It was unusual for Ethan to sit with strangers, but something about the sisters felt familiar and gentle, as if they carried peace with them. Mary was the first to speak. "We've been traveling for days," she said. "We're heading to a small farm that was left to us by our late father's friend. It's far from here, but we've promised ourselves we'll make it." Ruth nodded. "The journey has been harder than we expected. Roads are rough, the horse is tired, and the wagon. Well, the wagon has its own temper. Sarah laughed lightly. It doesn't like us very much. Ethan smiled quietly. He listened more than he talked, but he liked hearing their stories. He could tell the sisters cared deeply for one another. They spoke with honesty, and even in their tired state, they carried a hopeful spirit. Ruth then asked, "Do you live here alone?" Ethan nodded. "Yes. I inherited the ranch from my uncle. It's been home ever since." "Must be quiet," Sarah said. "It is," Ethan replied. "But I don't mind." The rain grew heavier, clattering loudly on the roof. The wind pushed against the barn walls, but the structure held strong. Inside, the four of them remained warm and safe. After a while, Ethan went to prepare hot tea using water he had boiled earlier. He brought the small cups to the barn, handing them out one by one. Sarah inhaled the warm steam and sighed. "This is the best thing I've had in days." Mary smiled in agreement. "You've been very kind to us." "It's nothing," Ethan said softly. "Just doing what anyone would." But Mary knew better. Not everyone was willing to open their barn to strangers, especially during a storm. Not everyone offered blankets, tea, and quiet comfort. She saw something steady in Ethan, a good heart that did not look for praise. As the hours passed, the storm showed no sign of stopping. The wind howled and lightning flashed, but inside the barn the atmosphere was gentle. The sisters talked more, sharing small memories of their father, old stories from town, and hopes for their new home. Ethan shared a few stories, two small pieces of his life, mix of ranch work, and memories of his uncle teaching him how to fix fences and ride horses. Sarah eventually stood and stretched her arms. "You know," she said with a playful tone again, "not many cowboys can handle 3 tired sisters in a storm." Ethan raised his eyebrows slightly. "Is that so?" "Oh yes," Ruth added with a smile. "Most would send us back into the rain." "Well," Ethan said, "I'm not most." The sisters exchanged glances and smiled warmly. Even though they had met him only hours ago, they felt safe around him. It was as if the barn had become a small island of calm in the middle of a loud storm. Time passed gently. The sisters grew more relaxed, and the barn filled with small bits of laughter. Ethan, who usually spoke little, found himself answering their questions, listening closely and enjoying their presence more than he expected. It had been a long time since he had company, especially kind company, as evening approached. The storm still raged outside, and it became clear that the sisters would need to spend the night on the ranch. Ethan prepared a clean corner of the barn with fresh hay and blankets. The sisters were grateful, offering to help with the setup. But Ethan shook his head. "Your guess," he said simply. Before settling down, Mary looked at Ethan and said, "We didn't plan to stop here today, but maybe it was meant to be." "Thank you for everything," Ethan nodded. "Rest. Tomorrow, the weather will be better, and I'll fix your wagon wheel." The sisters lay down on the soft bedding and soon fell asleep. Tired from their long journey and comforted by the safety of the barn, Ethan sat quietly near the lantern for a while. Watching the rain fall outside the small window, he did not know what tomorrow would bring. He did not know that this meeting would change his life in ways he had never imagined. He only knew that tonight 3 strangers had found shelter in his barn, and somehow their presence had filled the quiet ranch with warmth. And somewhere in the back of Ethan's mind, he couldn't forget Sarah's playful words echoing softly. "You think you can handle us, cowboy?" The storm raged on, but inside the barn, something gentle had begun. The storm had weakened during the night, but the clouds were still thick when morning came. A soft gray light slipped into the barn, through the gaps in the wooden boards. Ethan was already awake, feeding the horse and checking the tools he would need for the wagon wheel repair. He moved quietly so he wouldn't disturb the sisters, who were still sleeping under the blankets. For a moment, Ethan paused and watched them with a gentle expression. They looked peaceful. Mary, sleeping closest to the wall, Ruth curled up neatly, and Sarah resting, with one arm above her head. He had not expected strangers to fill his barn, yet now it felt strangely natural. He stepped outside and breathed in the cool morning air. The grass was still wet, and puddles covered parts of the yard. The sky looked heavy but calm. It was a good day to fix the wagon. A rustling sound came from the barn door. Ethan turned to see Mary stepping out, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "Good morning," she said quietly. "Morning," Ethan replied. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than we have in days," Mary said with a small smile. "Thank you for giving us shelter." He nodded and picked up the cracked wheel. "I'll start working on this. Shouldn't take too long." Mary looked at the wheel and let out a soft breath. "You're doing more for us than we can repay." "It's all right," Ethan said simply. "You're travelers. It's the right thing to help." A few minutes later, Ruth and Sarah woke as well. Ruth helped Mary prepare a simple breakfast with what little food they had, while Sarah brought water from the well. Ethan joined them once and then returned to his work. He removed the broken spokes and replaced them with new pieces of wood he shaped himself. The sisters watched him from nearby, impressed by how skilled and calm he was. "He works like he's been fixing wheels his whole life," Sarah whispered. Ruth nodded. "He makes everything look easy." Mary's eyes softened. "And he does it with a good heart." Sarah smiled playfully. "We should ask him to come with us." Mary shook her head lightly. "We can't ask that. He has a life here." But Sarah simply shrugged. She always believed that people were meant to cross paths for a reason. By midday, Ethan had finished fixing the wheel. He lifted it into place and secured it tightly. The wagon was ready again. The sisters clapped their hands lightly, full of appreciation. "You saved our journey," Ruth said happily. Ethan brushed dust off his hands. "Just glad it's working." But before they could celebrate, a sound broke the calm, sharp whistle carried by the wind. It was distant but clear, coming from the direction of the road. Ethan's calm face tightened. He knew what that sound meant. It wasn't a friendly signal. It was a call used by rough men who traveled in groups. The sisters glanced at one another nervously. "Is something wrong?" Mary asked. Ethan turned toward the road, watching carefully. "Maybe nothing. Maybe someone passing through." But his voice carried a hint of concern. Minutes later, a group of 4 riders appeared, moving quickly toward the ranch. Their horses were restless, and the men sat with confidence that didn't feel peaceful. They slowed down only when they reached the edge of Ethan's property. The sisters recognized them instantly. Ruth grabbed Mary's arm, her face turning pale. Sarah's breath tightened. "It's them," Mary whispered. "The ones who wouldn't leave us alone on the road." Ethan heard her and stepped forward, his calm nature hardening into quiet resolve. He didn't like conflict, and he wasn't a fighter, but he understood danger when he saw it. These men looked like the type who caused trouble wherever they went. The riders approached slowly. The man in front, with a dark hat pulled, low, looked at Ethan with a half-smile that held no warmth. "Morning," the man said. "We're looking for 3 sisters traveling by wagon. You seen them?" Ethan stood steady. "Why?" "They owe us something," the man said. "We need to collect it." Mary stepped forward, her voice strong despite her fear. "We owe you nothing. Leave us alone." The man's smile faded. "You don't talk unless I tell you to." Ethan shifted slightly, placing himself between the sisters and the riders. His voice remained quiet but firm. "They're under my roof. Any business you think you have with them ends here." The men laughed, but it was a cold, mocking laugh. "And who are you?" the leader asked. "A cowboy living alone? You think you can stop us?" Ethan didn't move. "You're on my land," he said. "Ride on." The wind grew colder. The tension thickened like the storm clouds from the night before. The sisters stood together behind Ethan, fear in their eyes but trust growing stronger. The leader of the men leaned forward in his saddle. "Move out of the way," he said. "The sisters come with us." Ethan shook his head. "No," the man chuckled, but there was anger building under his voice. "You think you can handle us, cowboy?" Sarah gasped softly at the echo of her own joke from the night before. But this time, the words carried real danger. Ethan didn't blink. "Try me." Before anything worse could happen, another voice cut through the tension, a loud shout from behind the riders. All eyes turned to see Mr. Hawthorne, Ethan's older neighbor, riding in with a rifle across his saddle. He wasn't pointing it, but his presence alone changed the situation. "Morning," Hawthorne said calmly. Didn't expect to see a pack of coyotes wandering so close to decent land. The leader of the riders turned, annoyed. Stay out of this, old man. It's not likely, Hawthorne replied. I've known Ethan since he was a boy. If he says these women stay, they stay. The men looked at one another. They weren't afraid of Ethan alone, but Hawthorne was a different story. The old man had a strong reputation, not for being violent, but for being someone no troublemaker wanted to cross. And the fact that he had shown up suddenly made them uneasy. The leader hissed under his breath and glared at Ethan one last time. This isn't over, then ride, Ethan said. The men pulled their horses around and sped off down the road, kicking dust behind them. The air finally loosened, releasing the tension that had held everyone stiff. The sisters exhaled deeply, trembling slightly. Mary placed a hand over her chest. We thought they would take us. They won't, Ethan said. Not while you're here. Hawthorne rode closer and looked at Ethan with a proud nod. Good job standing your ground, Ethan nodded gratefully. Thank you for coming, Hawthorne smiled. Saw them riding fast. Knew they weren't visiting for biscuits. Mary stepped forward. Sir, thank you. You helped us more than you know. Hawthorne waved his hand lightly. You thank the cowboy here? He's the one who stood first. Ethan looked away shyly, but the sisters saw the quiet strength inside him. They saw how he had stepped forward without thinking twice, how he had placed himself between them and danger. It wasn't loud bravery. It was steady bravery, the kind that didn't need to shout. After Hawthorne left, the ranch grew peaceful again. The sisters stood together, their hearts still racing but slowly calming. Sarah, trying to lighten the moment, gave a small smile. Ethan, we didn't mean to bring trouble to your home. You didn't, he replied. Trouble finds its own way, but it leaves when it's not welcome. Ruth stepped forward. Thank you for protecting us, Ethan nodded. Anyone would have done the same. But the sisters knew not everyone would have. They had met people on their travels who ignored them, dismissed them, or looked the other way when they needed help. Ethan wasn't like that. He stepped forward when others stepped back. As the afternoon sun broke through the clouds, the sisters helped Ethan tidy the barn and gather things scattered by the storm. They worked together naturally. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they were silent, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like a new kind of understanding. When the work was finished, Isara grinned and said softly, You handled them pretty well, cowboy. Ethan gave her a small smile. I'll try to handle peaceful things only from now on. Mary and Ruth laughed softly. By evening, the wagon was fully packed and ready. But instead of rushing to leave, the sisters sat with Ethan for one last quiet moment near the barn. The danger of earlier felt far away now, replaced by something warm and grateful. Tomorrow we'll leave early, Mary said. But today, we feel safe here, Ethan nodded. Stay as long as you need. The sisters knew their journey wasn't over, but they also knew they had met someone important. Ethan wasn't just a stranger who offered shelter. He had shown kindness, strength, a calm heart that protected without asking for anything. Sarah looked at him with gentle curiosity. You think you can handle us three again tomorrow? Ethan looked at her for a moment, then answered softly, I think I can. And for the first time in a long while, he felt something new, a quiet hope that maybe their paths weren't meant to separate so quickly. The morning sun rose slowly over the horizon, painting the ranch with a soft golden light. Ethan was already awake, walking among the horses, checking their water and feed. The events of the previous day had left a quiet tension in the air, but it was slowly replaced by calm. The sisters had stayed the night again, sleeping comfortably in the barn. Despite the earlier danger, there was now a sense of trust and ease among them all. Mary stepped out first, brushing dew from her shawl. She paused to look at the barn, feeling a strange warmth. This ranch, which had been a quiet home for a lone cowboy, had now become a temporary haven for them. She smiled to herself, remembering the way Ethan had stood firm when the men had threatened them. It was not the strength of a fighter, she realized, but the courage of someone who cared deeply about others. Ruth and Sarah followed, carrying small bundles of blankets and tidying the barn as they went. It feels strange, Ruth said softly, to feel safe like this, after traveling so long. Sarah laughed lightly. It's true. I didn't think a quiet ranch could feel so alive. Ethan approached, carrying fresh water for the horse. Breakfast is almost ready, he said. You can help if you want, but it's not necessary. Mary shook her head. We'd like to help. You've done so much for us already. Ethan nodded, appreciating their willingness, but maintaining his quiet way. He set the water down and began preparing simple food bread, cheese, and some fresh milk from the cows. The sisters joined him, helping where they could. Sarah carried milk, while Ruth set a small wooden table near the barn door. Mary chopped vegetables carefully, moving with a calm grace that matched her sister's energy. After a brief, cheerful breakfast, they stepped outside to check the wagon. Ethan examined it one last time, ensuring the wheel was secure and the harnesses were properly adjusted. The horse stamped its hooves in approval, and the sisters smiled. Everything was ready for the journey ahead. As they worked, Mary spoke softly, almost to herself. I wish we could stay longer, she said. This place, it feels like more than just shelter. It feels like home. Ethan glanced at her, raising an eyebrow. Home is wherever people care for one another, he said simply. You're welcome here any time. Ruth and Sarah nodded, each sensing the truth in his words. It wasn't just the barn or the ranch. It was the quiet strength of the man who lived here. Ethan was calm, steady, and reliable. He didn't need to boast or fight loudly. He simply acted with honesty and courage. And that made all the difference. Just as they finished packing, a gentle breeze blew across the field. The air smelled of fresh earth and the soft sweetness of wildflowers that grew near the fence line. The sisters paused, taking in the moment. Traveling had been long and difficult, filled with uncertainty and danger. But here, even for a few days, they had felt care, kindness, and safety. It was a gift they hadn't expected. Sarah stepped forward, looking at Ethan with a playful smile. You think you can handle us on the road? She teased, echoing the joke from the night they first met. Ethan laughed quietly, shaking his head. I think I can manage. Maybe. Mary smiled, seeing how far he had come from the quiet, reserved man she had first met. You really are remarkable, she said. Not because you helped us fight off strangers, but because you cared so much when it mattered. Ethan felt a flush of modesty. He was not used to receiving praise, but the sincerity in her words made him feel a warmth he had not known in years. Ruth joined in, giving a small nod. You've made a difference in our lives. We'll never forget this place or you. The sisters gathered their belongings, ready to continue their journey. Ethan helped Sarah adjust the straps on the wagon and made sure the horse was comfortable. Everything was in order, and the sun was fully shining now, casting long shadows across the ranch. It was a beautiful morning, filled with promise. Before they could leave, Mary turned back to Ethan. You should come with us, she said quietly. We could use someone like you. Someone steady, kind, and strong. Ethan looked at her, surprised by the offer. I have responsibilities here, he said. This ranch is my home. Mary smiled, understanding his words. I know. But if ever you want to visit, or if you ever want more than this quiet life, know that you have a place with us. He nodded slowly, feeling a rare sense of connection. Thank you, he said simply. That means a lot. Sarah grinned, bouncing on the balls of her feet. Come visit soon, cowboy, and bring your tools, we might need them. Ethan laughed, feeling lighter than he had in years. The sisters were about to leave, but something had shifted. Their paths had crossed for a reason, and he knew that their lives would remain connected in some way. Finally, the wagon was ready. The sisters climbed aboard, and Ethan waved as they slowly rolled down the dirt path. The horse moved steadily, the repaired wheel holding strong. The sisters waved back, their smiles bright and grateful. Ethan watched them disappear into the distance, feeling a sense of fulfillment he had not expected from such a simple act of kindness. After they were gone, Ethan walked back to the barn, feeling the quiet embrace of his home once more. The ranch was peaceful again, but it no longer felt empty. The laughter, courage, and warmth of the sisters lingered in the air, as if the barn had absorbed their presence and carried it forward. That evening, As Ethan sat by the fire in his small cabin, he thought about the sisters' journey and the courage they had shown. They were strong, kind, and determined, much like the people he admired in his own life. And though their paths would take them far from his ranch, he knew they would always carry a part of him with them, and he a part of them. Days passed, and life returned to its normal rhythm on the ranch. Ethan worked with his horses, repaired fences, and tended to the fields. Yet, in the quiet moments, he would remember the sisters' laughter, their gentle teasing, and the way they had trusted him when it mattered most. He realized that kindness and courage could bring people together in unexpected ways, and that even the smallest acts of care could change lives forever. Weeks later, a letter arrived at the ranch. It was from Mary, written in neat handwriting. Inside, she thanked him again for everything and invited him to visit their farm once it was fully settled. Ethan read the letter carefully, a small smile forming on his lips. He knew he would go. There was a promise in her words, a connection that could not be broken by distance. Ethan hung the letter on the wall beside his tools.
A reminder that
Life could change in a single day, and that connections made with care and courage could last a lifetime. Months passed, and one warm afternoon, Ethan finally rode to the sisters' farm. They greeted him with open arms, laughter, and joy. It was as if no time had passed at all. Together, they worked on fences, fed the animals, and shared stories of their journeys. Ethan felt a sense of belonging he had never known. The quiet cowboy who once lived alone had found friendship, trust, and a new kind of family. The day they had first surrounded him in the barn marais, teasing him with the words, "You think you can handle us?" had started as a joke, but it became the moment that connected their lives forever. Through storms, danger, and quiet moments, they had learned to trust, care, and rely on each other. And in doing so, they had created something stronger than any lone ranch or empty road could ever provide, a bond of courage, kindness, and friendship. Ethan smiled as he helped Sarah fix a broken fence post. While Mary and Ruth fed the chickens nearby, the sun was high, the farm alive with animals and laughter, and Ethan finally felt that the world had expanded in a way he had never imagined. The sisters' arrival at his barn had changed everything, not just for them, but for him as well. It was a change born from simple acts of care, steady courage, and quiet friendship. And so, quiet cowboy, who once preferred solitude, discovered a life full of warmth, laughter, and connection. The ranch remained his home, but now it held memories of friendship, courage, and a bond that would last forever. The sisters had brought more than just company. They had brought a story of kindness, trust, and strength that would always remain with him. As the sun set over the horizon, casting a soft orange glow across the fields, Ethan stood at the edge of the farm. Watching the sisters move among their animals, he felt a deep gratitude for the day they had first arrived, the storm that had kept them close, and the courage that had faced danger together. It was a life-changing moment, simple, yet powerful, and one he would remember for the rest of his days. Ethan realized that some encounters, even brief ones, could leave lasting marks. The sisters had entered his barn unexpectedly, but their presence had reshaped his quiet world. He had protected them, and in return, they had given him something he hadn't known he needed, a sense of connection, trust, and belonging. And that, Ethan knew, was the most valuable gift of all.